It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. It's Kerry Lutz. And hey, what's going on here in the Middle East? Good question. Who are our allies? That's what I'd like to know. You're probably curious as well. And we've got Ivan Eland with us now, a senior fellow and director of the Center on Peace and Liberty, the Independent Institute, also author of The Failure of Counterinsurgency, Afghanistan. And Ivan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, so Turkey here. I mean, diplomacy I've never quite understood, because it's the art of basically lying to somebody's face and pretending to tell the truth and pretending to like somebody when you really despise them, and all smiles and handshakes. What's going on here in Turkey, our ally in the Middle East here, our main ally, in fact?
Well, when you have allies like Turkey, it's sometimes your enemies seem better than your allies. But in the case of Turkey, it helped cause this ISIS problem by letting fighters, radical fighters, go through its territory to get to Syria, because it used to be friends with Syria, but then it decided that Assad should go, and it aided this civil war that's happening in Syria. Well, it still wants Syria to go. The U.S. originally wanted Assad to go, but I wondered at the time, Assad is bad, but he does at least stabilize the part of Syria that he still controls. But Obama was originally interested in getting rid of Syria, but not so much anymore since the ISIS threat came up, because Syria and Iran, 2 countries that the U.S. has been traditionally opposed to, both also oppose ISIS. So, we have the situation that's very complicated. And then you have the Turks wanting to take out Assad, and they don't care quite as much about ISIS as we do. They're more concerned with the Kurds and taking out Assad. So Turkish interests and U.S. interests don't really coincide here. And the United States would like to use a big base in Turkey because it's closer to bombing ISIS than sending aircraft from the Persian Gulf. But Turkey is saying, well, we want you to build a no-fly zone above our territory and part of Syria to help refugees. Well, they're not defending the refugees from the air, from ISIS aircraft. They're ostensibly defending them from Syrian aircraft. But if the U.S. were to do that and meet the Turkish demands to use this base by setting up this no-fly zone, then you challenge Syrian aircraft in their own airspace, and then you also have to take down their air defenses to make it safe for your own aircraft to fly. So I think the real purpose of Turkey is to get us involved in attacking Assad and widen the war even more than we have, since now we're going after ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but we're not going after Assad's forces or his aircraft. So I think this is a way for Turkey to get what it wants, and that is to get Assad removed from power. But the U.S. would be sucked deeper into this morass. And I know your listeners probably think that this is very complicated, but the bottom line is the U.S., if it paid attention to what Turkey wants to do, we would get sucked deeper and deeper into, not only Iraq, which we've already been there for years, but also Syria, the Syrian civil war as well. And, instead, Turkey, so we're in the absurd situation of helping Turkey defend itself against ISIS by begging it to do that and bribing it to let us help defend it against ISIS is what it amounts to. And so this alliance that we have, Turkey's a part of NATO, and so therefore, if they are attacked, we're obligated to defend them under this outdated alliance. But so far ISIS really hasn't attacked Turkey, but they're not making it easy for us to help them out here.
Yeah, and the Turks kind of sat by and watched while that town was being overridden by ISIS on the border of Syria with the Kurds, right? And it looked like tens of thousands of Kurds were going to be wiped out by ISIS, and they did absolutely nothing to aid the Kurds, which obviously,
right, exactly,
right,
exactly. Yeah, that's a further complication. The Kurds have a section of Turkey, and the Turks are very interested in keeping the Kurds under control there. And this was a Kurdish city in Syria. And so the Turks really didn't want to help it because they fear the Kurds more than they fear ISIS. And from our perspective, since we don't have any local allies to battle ISIS that are really worth much, the Iraqi army ran away. The Kurdish Peshmerga in Iraq, they weren't as vaunted as they were reported to be, and ISIS got the best of them initially. And of course, in Syria, we have the Syrian government, but they're not very friendly to the U.S. So our local allies aren't very good. So then we have to go to regional allies. And of course, that would be Turkey because it has a huge army. So we would like Turkey to send troops in there and battle ISIS on the ground. But of course, they're far from doing that, as you point out, because they won't even help the Kurds on the other side because they fear the Kurds more than ISIS. So it's all a big mess. And the bottom line is the Turks don't have the same interests that we do in that region. And we're trying to push on a string by getting the Turks to do what we want. And instead, I think we should just pull out and say, listen, Turks, you're going to have to deal with this ISIS problem on your own.
Yeah, which you helped create. And obviously, Turkey can't be too happy with what has effectively become almost Kurdistan, almost a country now in Iraq. Now that Iraq is collapsing and pretty much been partitioned de facto, Kurdistan there is really the only thing left standing. So it's just a matter of time before at some point they're going to declare independence. And it's really Turkey's worst nightmare because then the Kurds in Turkey potentially are going to become, potentially revolt, looking to join that, looking for their slice of the pie. And, they're not too happy with us about that. So really the interests have diverged, and maybe it's time to get rid of this alliance that really, like you said before, it's a holdover, a vestige from the Cold War, and perhaps doesn't serve the U.S.'s interests all too well at this point, and makes it impossible for the U.S. to really pursue its own interests.
I think it's sort of like a straitjacket. We developed all these interests, not only NATO, but U.S. Japanese bilateral interests, U.S. Alliance, the U.S. South Korean alliance during the Cold War. But the Cold War is over, and it really is sort of a straitjacket for our policy. It impedes our independence now that the situation has changed. And this is a problem with alliances. Number one, they hang around longer than they're supposed to. Organizations outlive their usefulness, but the bureaucratic organization continues and wants to expand its mission and territory, which is what NATO did. And then the second, problem that you have is that it not only the alliance destroys your independence, but it also requires you to you can't walk away from Turkey in a situation like this. You should throw up your hands and say, well, hey, this is your problem. You should be doing more to defend it. And instead, you want to bribe so that we can help defend you. And we're not doing that. And, ISIS is a regional threat primarily, and you've got the best army in the region, so why don't you deal with them? We can't say that because we are obliged under the treaty obligations to defend them if they're attacked.
Yeah, it's kind of become a cure in search of a disease, hasn't it?
Right, exactly.
And the disease that's out there, it can't even properly address because, like you say, it's been locked in and or straitjacketed. And
I also go ahead.
Yeah, and and then you got to wonder what's going to happen next when something really, really goes wrong. Where are they going to be when we need them?
Yeah, and I also think one other problem with the alliance, and this is true in other places as well, whenever small countries are protected by a large country like us, they tend to be more bold. They're kind of like the little runt who's got his big brother looking over his shoulder. The little runt gets a lot tougher and starts taunting, other countries and everything. And in fact, Turkey had some very irresponsible policy by trying to take out Assad. And I'm not sure why they did that, because now what they're faced with, not only an independent Kurdistan in Iraq, but one in Syria as well, because the Syrian government no longer controls the Kurdish portion of Syria. So, flipping from being a friend of Syria's to trying to take out Assad, I think Turkey was trying to flex this regional muscle that it thought it was going to have, and now all its policies have pretty much turned to sand, if you want to call it that. It supported the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and of course that's been overthrown. So that Turkey aspired to be a regional power, and I think that's why they were trying to take out Assad, just to show that they could do that. One of the reasons, but I still don't get it, because if you take out Assad, or if he's weakened as he currently is and only controls part of Syria, what you have is an effect of another Kurdish homeland on your border to rile up your own Kurds. The Kurds are in 4 countries. That's why they really don't have a country. And Turkey and Syria and Iraq are 3 of the countries. Iran is the other country that has Kurds in it. But, you have all these independent Kurdistans around. That riles up your own Kurds so that they think they can get autonomy. And they had a civil war in Turkey for a long time. They still have one over the Kurds within Turkey getting some autonomy.
Yeah. And the Kurds are the largest ethnic group on the planet who don't have a country. And, you got to wonder how long that situation is going to be. Eventually, I think the Biden solution is going to take place in Iraq, whether anyone likes it or not, because, as the central government weakens there, the great success story of the Iraq War is Kurdistan there. And
I've been for the Biden solution all the way along. And in fact, I was invited to a conference when Biden was still a senator, and he was pushing a partition solution in Iraq. And really, effectively, Iraq is already partitioned by civil war, and so is Syria. And so these central governments are now weakened, and I don't think they're ever going to come back. And that may be a good thing. Unfortunately, they could have done this peacefully, but now you have this civil war. And I think one of the ways to get rid of ISIS without heavy U.S. involvement is to take away the fear of the Sunnis, of the Shiite government in Iraq, because the Iraqi Sunnis have a different interest than the U.S. too, because we're supporting the Shiite government, but the Shiite government has oppressed the Sunnis. Now we have a new Shiite leader. It's not Maliki anymore, and he's put a window dressing on this thing. But the Iraqi army was still ethnic cleansing Sunnis from certain parts, from Sunni towns just the other day. So the Sunnis the reason they support this ISIS group is because they fear the central government in Baghdad more than they fear the Sunnis. So if you would decentralize Iraq, let the Kurds govern themselves, the Sunnis and the Shiites all govern themselves, then the Sunnis would be more likely to overthrow ISIS as they did the precursor group Al Qaeda in Iraq during the U.S. occupation, because they don't fear the Shiites anymore. So they have no reason to support these violent jihadists. But right now they support them because they're a counterpunch to the Iraqi Shia government.
Yeah, exactly. It gives them some power, and it gives them, like you said, effectively, a check on the power of the, of the Shiite government. So it's kind of, analogous to what's going on right now in Afghanistan, and the U.S. just doesn't understand these tribal rivalries either. I don't think the U.S. is really equipped to really enter into these disputes, which have been simmering or, going on for really thousands of years, or hundreds of years in any event. Because look what just happened in Afghanistan. We've got all these different tribes. The Pashtuns, who kind of line up with the Pakistanis, and then we have the other groups there, and just expecting them to all play nicely with one another. How's that going to happen? How's that going to work out in Afghanistan, Ivan? Is it going to work out the same way?
Work out. We have the same sort of thing. We have a power sharing agreement between the two candidates. One represents the Pashtun group, and the other one represents the Tajik and Uzbek factions, which are smaller than the Pashtun. Pashtuns have always dominated Afghanistan. But you have a similar situation in Iraq. You have this power sharing agreement on the surface, but the ethnic groups and ethno-sectarian groups in Iraq, or the tribal groups in Afghanistan, it's the same problem. You're trying to create a democracy in two countries that don't have a political culture of that. They have a winner-take-all political culture. When in a democracy, what you need a majority rule, but you also need respect for the minorities' rights. And the minority is supposed to be a loyal opposition. In other words, not trying to overthrow the government. But in these cases, a lot of times what you get with democracy in countries like this is you get the oppression of the majority on the minority. And of course, there's a difference between a democracy, which is that, and a liberal democracy, which is that the minority also has rights that the majority can't oppress them. And we don't have that in these sorts of things, because the income levels in the countries aren't probably high enough to sustain a liberal democracy, because you have to have a middle class that gets fed up and says to the elite, listen, we want a voice in this. And so, in other words, democracy has to bubble up from the bottom. It can't be imposed at the point of a gun, and particularly it can't be imposed by foreigners. And that's what we're agreeing. Well, that's what we are in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, is we're regarded as foreign occupiers. We don't see that, but of course those countries do, and they see that the foreign occupiers are coming in. And in these types of situations, the foreign occupier, I say that in my book, The Failure of Counterinsurgency, that it's very hard for great powers to fight insurgents in a guerrilla that are fighting in a guerrilla fashion, because the guerrillas usually have the support of the population. And you say, well, how can that be when you have like Al Qaeda in Iraq, or now ISIS, and then on the other side in Afghanistan you had the Taliban, and all these people are brutal, right? Well, the problem is a lot of them are locals, and we're foreign occupiers. And in insurgencies, the foreign occupier does not get the benefit of the doubt. I mean, you can hand out candy to kids, you can hand out candy to adults in the form of development projects and that sort of thing, but they'll just take your money, and their loyalty is still toward the local people, even if they're brutal.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine, he was in Vietnam and stationed in South Vietnam, and when Ho Chi Minh died, he said all of South Vietnam, they were mourning his passing, even though he was doing all these brutal things, killing his own people, to win the war. They were in tears over his death. And I think you got the same situation occurring in Afghanistan and in Iraq, where the loyalty is to their own countrymen, regardless how bad they are. They're still our countrymen. And like you said, the U.S. is still a foreign occupying force, no matter how you cut it. And, they're always going to be considered foreign occupiers regardless. So, the concept of nation building from outside the country just can't work, can it?
Yeah, it's a very low probability of succeeding in the. Now there's 17 cases where we've tried to bring democracy to in a nation building sort of way since 1900 through the use of U.S. military power, and in those only 4 have succeeded over 10 years, and so. I would say the Afghan is still technically out, so we might reduce it to 16. But I think the Iraq democracy has already failed, so we don't have to reduce it to 15. That's only 4 out of 16 cases have lasted 10 years or more, and so nation building really doesn't work when you look at the track record very well of the U.S. imposing democracy via the point of a gun. People see the gun and not the benefits of democracy. They have to find this on their own, not be coerced into adopting it.
Yeah, and the times where it's worked, the situation is so much different than these countries. Really total defeat and just total unconditional surrender. You just haven't had it in these countries, and you never will. So to think otherwise, it's just naive. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this idea that we were going to take democracy to Iraq and the rest of the Middle East was just the regional experts, when George Bush said that, they were just scratching their heads going, good luck. And we've seen the Arab Spring, even when it bubbled up from the people in the country, it was snuffed out. There wasn't a political culture enough in any of these countries to sustain it. Tunisia may be, but they're still struggling. That's out. Certainly Egypt has failed. Syria failed. Bahrain failed. Am I missing anybody? Well, Iraq failed.
Yeah.
So, and Afghanistan is about ready to fail. So I think the track record, even in this region, of democracy bubbling up from the bottom it's iffy, and imposing it from the top's really even less of a chance.
Yeah,
but we still keep trying to do it, I think.
Yeah, well, a definition of insanity that all too abused and tortured quote from Einstein, but doesn't stop us from trying. Ivan, just quickly give us your website where you find most of your work.
For the Independent Institute, it's at www.independent, and that's with a T.org.
All right. And as always, we have the link to your site there in financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Don't forget, sign up for the free newsletter, and we'll talk to you when the next development comes along, which I'm sure won't be too long, probably after the first of the year. And hey, happy and a healthy new year to you and yours, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Kerry. Bye.
Bye.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.